Some places feel safe until they don't. A quiet house deep in the woods, a storm rolling in, and a series of eerie phone calls that should have meant nothing. But sometimes, the things we ignore come back to haunt us. And sometimes, they're standing closer than we think. I stayed at my friend's place for the weekend. She was off on a trip with her family, but she had a small cat that hated thunderstorms, and a big storm was rolling in. Molly, her cat, was independent, always doing her own thing, but storms made her nervous. The storm had already started the day before my friend left, and by Saturday, it had settled in for the weekend. I spent the night without any trouble. Molly seemed fine, and I enjoyed a quiet morning curled up on the couch with a book. Her place was out in the woods, peaceful, secluded. I always loved it there. Sometime in the afternoon, the home phone rang. This was back when landlines were still common. I checked, thinking maybe it was my friend, but the caller ID showed unknown number. I let it ring. A few minutes later, the phone rang again. Same number. I ignored it, but this time, a voice came through on the answering machine. A quiet male voice. Just one word. My friend's name. Like a question, like he was testing to see if she was there. Then silence. Then the call cut off. I hesitated. It was strange, but maybe it was a relative? Someone she knew? I shot her a text just in case. She never replied. Over the next few hours, 2 more calls came from that same unknown number. No messages this time. I shrugged it off. Probably nothing. Evening came. Around 8 or 9, I settled in to watch a movie upstairs. About halfway through, I remembered to check on Molly. I went downstairs, but the moment I reached the bottom step, I stopped. Molly was standing at the front door, completely still, staring at the crack beneath it. Her little body was tense, her eyes locked on the door like she was waiting for it to open. I called her name. She flicked her head toward me, but immediately turned back to the door. A weird chill crept over me. Slowly, I approached and hesitantly leaned in to look through the peephole. The rain had fogged up the glass, making everything outside blurry. But then, movement. Something, or someone, was standing on the other side of the porch. I squinted, trying to make sense of the shape beyond the glass. I couldn't tell what it was, but the way it shifted, just barely, told me I wasn't imagining it. My stomach knotted. If it was a person, why weren't they knocking? Minutes passed. Nothing changed. My pulse settled. Maybe I was just creeping myself out. If someone was out there, wouldn't they have made a move by now? Shaking it off, I went to check Molly's food and water, grabbed some snacks, and returned upstairs. Before I went back to the bedroom, I glanced at the door one last time. Molly was gone. I hesitated, then looked outside again. Something was different. The fog on the glass still made it hard to see. But one of the shapes I'd been staring at before, it wasn't there anymore. Had there actually been someone standing there the whole time? A prickling unease settled deep in my bones. I scooped Molly up and carried her upstairs with me. I tried to focus on my movie, but the unsettling feeling wouldn't go away. 30 minutes later, Molly suddenly leapt from the bed and padded toward the bedroom door. She didn't scratch at it, didn't look at me. She just stood there, staring at the thin gap beneath it, just like she had at the front door. My pulse hammered. I swallowed and called her name, barely above a whisper. She didn't react. I stood, moving slowly, quietly, until I was right beside her. Holding my breath, I pressed my ear to the door. Silence. I lowered myself, peering through the narrow gap between the door and the floor. My entire body jolted backward. Someone was standing just inches away. My gaze snapped to the doorknob. It wasn't locked. I lunged, twisting the lock into place just as the person on the other side took off. I heard heavy footsteps racing down the stairs, then nothing. Hands shaking, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. Then I called my friend. By the time the cops arrived, the house was empty. No sign of forced entry. No sign of anyone. The police suspected it was a stalker, the same person who had been calling all day. They tried to trace the number, but nothing came up. That was it. No answers. I felt sick for my friend. Whoever that man was, he wasn't after me. He was after her. And he had been watching. Had he known she was gone? Or had he expected to find her there? Was he planning to wait for her? We never found out who he was, or what he really wanted. Who was watching from the other side of the door? What would have happened if I hadn't locked it in time? I still don't know, and that's the worst part. If you ever hear strange calls from an unknown number, if you ever feel watched but see no one, don't ignore it. Because sometimes the danger isn't just in your head, it's standing right outside your door. If you enjoyed this story and want more chilling tales, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. You never know when the next story might hit a little too close to home.